Hello everyone, thank you for watching Edupedia World videos. This is the part 2 video of SAP workflow. Okay, so in the earlier video we have studied what a workflow is. Okay, so it connects the people, the process, and we have the objects, the map objects. So in this video we'll go into more technical details regarding the workflow. So this is the workflow architecture. We have the organizational level, the process level, and the business object level. Okay, so at the organization level we have certain rules. Okay, so we have different people following the rules. So we have the organization unit, the positions, the users, the activity, and the groups. Who is executing the process steps? Organizational management. Okay, so at the first level we have the people. So why the software and everything is there? It's for the end users, it's for the people to use it in the firm. And in the firm we have different users who are placed at different positions. Okay, they are mapped to different organizational units, they do different activities, and they fall into certain groups. So depending upon the type of the work each person performs, we have divided the organization into different groups, positions, and units. Okay, so who is executing the process step? Okay, so it's the organizational management. The subordinate can only submit the leave request, he can't approve it. It's the manager who has to approve it. So the subordinate organizational unit is different and the manager's organizational unit is different. Okay, so that is clear at this point. So we have different people doing different activities and they fall under different categories of groups or positions or organizational units. The next one, we have the process level. Which step does the process contain? That's the workflow builder. Okay, now a certain process is followed in the organization. Okay, so the leave has to be submitted by the subordinate to this particular manager. Okay, and the manager will approve it. So this submission and approval has to be done in a process. It has to be followed in a particular fashion. So there we have the process level. Similarly, when you submit a purchase requisition order, okay, so you might have like first level approval, second level approval, and so on. Okay, so we have a certain process laid down in the organization which is followed by the users. So this process is controlled by the workflow builder. The next one is the business object level. Okay, so we have ideally the actual objects like methods, events, attributes, PAPI, etc. Okay, so if you take a purchase order, so that's an object. A sales document, it's an object. Okay, a leave request, a HRMS record, that is an object. So we have different methods, events, attributes, and PAPIs working on these objects. So the business object type level, business object repository. Okay, and at the low level, what is started? The ABAP of different applications. It's nothing but it's a piece of ABAP. It can be a table, it is a report, or it's a structure, or whatever it is. At the lowest level we have the ABAP objects. Okay, so we have certain users following a process which is mapped to which work on the objects. So the integration of all this is controlled in a timely manner by a workflow. Okay, so this is a workflow architecture. The next one is workflow definition steps. A workflow definition describes the workflow process. A workflow definition is made up of individual modular steps. So when we talk about the workflow, we have many steps in the workflow. Okay, and it's nothing but it's a flow of process. Okay, so initially the workflow is started by a submission of a leave request. Okay, then it goes to the manager, he'll approve it, he can reject it, or he can ask the subordinate to resubmit it. Okay, so there are certain clauses like where if he approves, do this, if he rejects, do this. Okay, so this is similar to a flow chart which we have studied in our various basic computer languages. Okay, so a workflow flows. The flow is similar to a flow chart. Okay, and this is known as the workflow definition. This is a pictorial representation of the workflow. So what are the steps we have? We have the task reference, the user decision, the document from the template, web activity. So we have many tasks. Okay, say like a user can approve it, he can reject it. Okay, so it depends on the user decision also. Then the internal process, you have conditions like the condition, multiple condition, event creator, wait for event, container operation, loop, until, while, and fork. So you have all this blah blah blah. So when you do something, okay, a workflow gets triggered, then it flows. The flow goes on. At the next step, depending upon the user's decision, again the workflow will take further steps. Like if the leave is approved, then the employee will get a notification that the leave is approved and the workflow completes. If the leave is rejected, okay, so even he'll get a notification and the workflow completes. If the manager has asked to resubmit the leave, then it again the workflow flows. Okay, so it's nothing but a loop again. So again it goes back there. Again the employee will resubmit the leave, again it goes for approval. Okay, so we have different notifications. The user decisions are there, approvals like approvals, rejections, etc., and we have different notifications at various levels. So this is a pictorial representation of the workflow. Okay, this is known as, so it's nothing but it's a flow of process and it has multiple steps. Now see, this is an example of a workflow. Notification of absence created. So approve notification of absence. Once it's approved, then a mail is sent, okay, and the workflow completes. If it's rejected, you have two cases, whether revise of notification is necessary or not. Okay, if it's no, then the workflow completes. If it's yes, then again this chain flows. Okay, so if it's approved or simply rejected without resubmission, the workflow terminates. Okay, otherwise then again it flows back. Again the employee will change the leave request and resubmit it. Okay, so in the system also you can see when you see the graphical representation of a workflow, it will be similar to this. Okay, so you have different decisions, you have different nodes, okay, where different users perform different activities based on their decisions. Okay, and depending upon that, the workflow will continue or it will come to an end. Now, what is a task? A task can be defined as an activity that can be executed within a workflow definition or independently. Tasks can refer to automatically executable methods, background tasks, or they can need a user to execute them, dialog tasks. The task is nothing but it's a sub-step of the workflow. It's an independent unit of a workflow. Okay, so here these are all the tasks, like approve of notification of absence, whether like it's approved or it can be rejected. Okay, again resubmission. Okay, so these are all different tasks in the workflow. Okay, so they can be executed within a workflow definition or independently. The task can refer to the automatically executable methods or they can need a user to execute them. So depending upon the configuration of the workflow, the task, it can flow automatically or it will need a user intervention. Okay, so depending upon the user's discretion, the task will continue. Some cases, the workflow is configured in such a case that at some steps, without user intervention, the task flows ahead. But at some points, we of course do need the user intervention. Okay, so like check work plan, post invoice, call customer, release document, change master material, run report, approve leave. What else? So these are nothing but some examples of a task in the workflow. Single step task and multi-step task. We have two types of tasks. What is a single step task? A task can be part of a workflow definition as a step of the type activity, and a multi-step task is nothing but when you create a workflow directly in the workflow builder, the multi-step task is created by the system. So a single step task, what is a single step task? Okay, so it's a part of the workflow definition as a step of a type activity. So it's a result, this task is a result from some activity which is performed. Okay, and a multi-step task is you create a workflow directly in the workflow builder. Then that is a multi-step task. Okay, so a workflow has n number of tasks. Okay, and tasks are of two types: single step and multi-step. Single step means it can be a part of the workflow definition. It results of some, from an activity. The single step task is a result, and a multi-step task is when you directly create the workflow in a workflow builder. Now, the tasks in workflow. An event triggers a workflow. The workflow triggers a BO which may trigger a method or a task. The BO method can call a function module. Okay, so the first one is the event triggers a workflow. Workflow is nothing but it's a result of an event, and the workflow triggers a business object which may trigger a method or a task. Okay, so the workflow, what does it do? It works on some business object. Okay, and that business object can call a function module. Okay, so from an event, workflow is triggered. This workflow works on business objects, and this business objects internally calls various functions or modules. That's what this user, following the process, does some manipulation at the business object level, which in turn triggers various above objects. Okay, so it's nothing but it's a task. Now, agent. An agent is an executor of work item. Now we have different work items or tasks. Okay, so another terminology for a task is a work item. Now that some tasks need manual intervention and some are automatic. So when it requires a manual intervention, okay, so we have an user who does it, and that user is termed as a agent in the workflow. The agent is responsible for executing a task in a workflow. So this agent, he executes the task in a workflow. Agent is determined by the system either through the organizational chart or directly if the user is assigned as agent for a particular task. Okay, so how an agent is determined? He is determined by the system either through an organizational chart or directly if the user is assigned as an agent for the particular task. So the agent is determined either through organizational chart, okay, or if he is selected to execute that particular task. So when the workflow moves ahead, okay, at certain tasks where the user intervention is required, so that user determination is already predefined. Okay, in some cases you do it manually. If the agents of the individual workflow steps are determined using a customer specific organizational chart, your agent assignment in the workflow remains flexible to change. Okay, so for the workflow, say I submitted a leave request. Okay, we have n number of managers in the company, but I am a subordinate of a particular manager. Okay, so my leave record should go to my manager only, not to some other manager. Okay, so but the process, this workflow is common across the entire organization. All users use the same template and the same workflow is triggered, but the agent, depending upon who triggered the workflow, the agent has to be determined. So we have an organizational chart, okay, in our company. And so what does the workflow do? It will check in the system like this user is a subordinate of which manager. Okay, so depending upon that mapping, the agent for the approval step, that is the user for the approval step, who is the manager, is determined. Okay, so now we have the actual agent, the selected, and the possible agents. A possible agent is a collection of agents who qualify to execute a work item. So in the example which we discussed just now, manager. So all managers are possible agents, okay, to approve the leave request. Next, the selected ones. The selected agents are those possible agents who are elected to execute a task at runtime. Okay, so say like you have a manager as well as a backup manager in case if your manager goes on leave. So both of these managers are the selected agents. Now the actual agent, it is the agent among those selected agents who actually process the work item. So the actual agent is the one who actually processes your work item. Okay, so we have the processing agents that are, apart from these three, the possible, selected, and actual, we have processing agents, deadline agents, and notification agents also. Okay, so agent is nothing but it's the user who executes the work item. Okay, so that agent determination can be done, it's done through an organizational chart, or you directly assign a user for that particular task in the workflow. Okay, we have possible, selected, and actual agents. Now, deadline monitoring allows you to control the timelines within which a work item should be executed. So, workflow, from the definition itself, workflow is nothing but everything should be correct. Doing the right work by right user at right time. Okay, so when you follow a process, okay, when certain users are following a process, whatever work they do, it should be completed in a timely manner. Okay, so I have submitted my leave request, and there should be a deadline for the manager to approve the leave request. Okay, it's simply see like I have submitted my leave request 2 months before. Okay, so it's not that after 1.5 months the manager will approve my leave. Okay, so the leave has to be approved within certain deadline. Say like it's some 10 days or 20 days. So that's how we compel the users to complete their work in a timely manner, because all users, they'll be busy in doing so many things. Okay, so if there is no follow-up strategy, then people tend to forget. Okay, in their busy schedules, they'll tend to forget some things. So to prevent that, this workflow, when it runs, okay, it sends out some notifications. Okay, it sends out some reminders, alert mails to the users to follow up on their work. So following deadline tabs are available: requested start, latest, requested end, and latest end. So the requested start is nothing but the earliest time at which the work item processing should start. Latest, the latest time by which the work item execution should start. Requested end, the deadline by which processing of a work item should end. And latest end, the time by which the processing of a work item must end. Okay, so in a requested start, it's nothing but the early time at which the work item processing should start. Okay, and latest, we have the latest time by which this work item execution should start. Requested end, the deadline by which the processing of a work item should end. And the latest end, the time by which the processing of a work item must end. Okay, you can define reactions to a missed deadline for the last 3 deadline types. The system offers the possible reactions. One is the notification. It sends notification to the recipient method mentioned in the deadline tab page, and free modeling. It creates a new outcome for the deadline and allows the developer to model the outcome when the deadline reaches. For example, setting the work item as obsolete if the latest end is reached. So when the work is not completed in a deadline time, so reminder notifications are sent. Okay, so we know that this work item should complete in the next 5 days. Then every day a mail is sent to the agent who has to execute that work item. Okay, so reminders, follow-up notification mails are triggered. The other one is, say like if the deadline has crossed and the work item is not processed, then you can do some changes, like you can mark the work item as obsolete. Okay, then again the user has to create a new record which will trigger a new workflow. Okay, so this is about deadline monitoring. Now, object types and workflow. SAP business workflow has been developed on object-oriented basis. So the SAP workflow is structured in an object-oriented basis. The business object types are identified and described with their object methods in the business object repository of the R3 system. Generally, one object is created in the system and then processed in a workflow over several steps by various employees. Okay, so the SAP workflow is similar to an object-oriented mechanism. Okay, and all the objects are stored in the business object repository. Okay, so one object is created in the system and then processed in a workflow over several steps by various employees. Okay, so on the same object, okay, different workflows can flow. Okay, so one object is created in the system and it's processed by a workflow over several steps by various employees. Okay, so let us take an example of a leave record. Okay, n number of employees create n number of leave records of their own. Okay, so the object is same, it's the leave record for all the employees, but what variable that object takes. Okay, I create a leave record for myself, my colleague creates a leave record for himself. Okay, so that the actual structure is same, but the value which it takes, okay, which employee created the leave record is different. Okay, so don't get confused, like it's only n number of workflows are manipulating the same object. Object, I mean like sales document. So we have so many sales documents depending upon the number, right? Depending upon the value which we enter. Okay, so for each of these objects, okay, so a workflow processes this objects in various steps by various users. Okay, so in general, the workflow is based on an object-oriented mechanism. We have different objects which are stored in a business object repository, and the workflow processes an object in various steps by various agents. Okay, so briefing up what we have discussed in this video, we have started with the workflow architecture, where we have the organization level, that's the users, they follow a process at the process level, and at the underlying we have the business objects level. Okay, so we have different methods, events, attributes, BAPs, okay, and they work on different BAP objects. So the workflow definition steps. Okay, this is a pictorial representation of a workflow. It's nothing but it has different steps. Okay, and it follows a process. Okay, so these are the steps, and we have some internal process control mechanisms. So this is an example of a workflow. The next one, what is a task? A task is nothing but it's a step of a workflow which is executed in a workflow. N number of tasks form a workflow. Okay, so a task can be automatically executed or it needs some user intervention. Then we have two types of tasks, the single step task and the multi-step task. Okay, and how the tasks flow in a workflow. The next one we have discussed about agents. An agent, he executes a task or a work item. Okay, we have the actual agents selected in the possible agents. Apart from this, we have processing agents, the deadline agents, and the notification agents also. So agent is nothing but the user who processes a step or a work item in a workflow. Then deadline monitoring. To complete a particular task in a workflow, okay, we set up some deadlines. Okay, so in order to achieve that, the work to be completed before the deadline, notifications can be sent. Say like if the work item is not actioned and the deadline has crossed, then we can do certain things like the workflow will be marked as complete, or it will be marked as obsolete, or it will be deleted, and a new workflow has to be created. Okay, then the workflow is based on an object-oriented model. Okay, so here we have discussed this term business object repository. Okay, and in a workflow, one object is processed at several steps by different agents. Okay, so these two videos, the part 1 video and part 2 of SAP workflow, we have discussed about the technical terms, okay, and the theoretical part of an SAP workflow. Okay, so from the next video onwards, we go into the actual transactions, the transaction codes which are used in the context of workflow monitoring and administration. So those are okay. So these two videos gives you an idea about what a workflow is, the various technical terms which we use in a workflow. Okay, so keep on watching the other videos. Okay, so you'll get to know like what all transactions we use in what context for workflow administration. Thank you.